Revant Kumar. Please try to log in with actual name. And Sri. Please try to log in with complete name given to us. When you log into GoToMeeting, try to use complete name and proper name which is given to us. Don't use shortcut names and other names, okay? At least from tomorrow onwards, just follow that. I think I am assuming Sri is Srinivas. Is it Srinivas?
No, this Srikanth.
Okay. Srikanth. Who is this Revant Kumar? Is this Sanam Reddy, something like that?
Sir?
Who is Revant Kumar?
Me, sir.
What's your name?
Revant Kumar Reddy, sir.
But we did not provide any email ID. You did not provide any email ID to us, right? How you are able to get meeting link?
Yeah, this is sent from my brother-in-law, sir.
Okay. Okay, I'll try to look into this tomorrow.
Unmuted.
Please try to log in with actual names. And who is this Rajesh? Okay, fine. That's what, there's a lot of confusion, so better try to log in. This is Sanam. I think this is still unknown. And who is Rajesh?
It's Rajesh Kumar. I have edited my name now.
What's your name?
Rajesh Kumar.
Did you receive meeting link from us, or you're
Yeah,
getting from your friends?
No. I'm getting from you only. I've paid it. I've paid the fees.
What's your name?
Rajesh Kumar.
Okay, I'll try to check that.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so today's session is one of the important session, so try to follow it carefully. Okay, can you see my screen now? Can you hear me properly? Jayakar, Divya, Abdul, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, sir, I can hear.
Okay, fine.
Yes,
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. Okay, let me start today's session. In today's session, we'll try to focus on other screen elements and we'll try to understand the very other important options. So first, yesterday point of view, we have used some simple screen elements. Yesterday, we have used simple screen elements. Like simple screen elements, you need to remember these properties. When you're using simple screen elements, just you need to deal with normal properties. For example, label, you have to know text property. In case of text screen element, you need to use text property. For input screen element, you need to use value property. For input screen element, value property. For checkbox, we need to use selected property. And for switch, we use state property. Image, we use src property. And for link, we use like href property. Text, href, and target properties. These are three important properties for link. Similarly, rating indicator, we use value property and max value property. These two are important properties. For progress indicator, we use percent value property. Similarly, for date picker, value is an important property. For time picker, also value is important property. Text area, value is an important property. Along with rows and columns. Yesterday we have used it. Similarly, for slider, we use value property, min, as well as max property. So when you're using simple screen elements, just you need to deal with properties, simple screen elements. But when we deal with complex screen elements, you need to follow the below approach. Yesterday we have created all these things. These are all simple screen elements. While using simple screen elements, just you need to deal with only properties, normal properties. But when you're dealing with complex screen elements, you need to follow this approach. Complex screen elements, you need to know what is a complex screen element. You need to know aggregation property. You need to know aggregation property. And what is the internal screen element associated with aggregation property. And for internal screen element, there will be the regular property. So for complex screen elements, for dealing with complex screen elements, you need to deal with these four options. You should know what is complex screen element and its aggregation property, and what is the supported internal screen element for that aggregation property, and what's the property of internal screen element. So by using this approach, we can write our coding very easily. Okay, so here, but in case of simple screen elements, you need not worry about aggregation properties. For simple screen elements, it's not required to deal with aggregation properties. For simple screen elements, the regular properties, the normal properties are enough. Okay, 1 second. Someone is waiting for meeting link. Okay, so when you're dealing with complex screen elements, aggregation property is required, internal screen element is required, and the property of internal screen element is required. For example, if I'm going with a drop-down box, that is technically select screen element. Drop-down box, we call it as select screen element according to our documentation. So here, we need to make use of aggregation property. Items is an aggregation property here. For items aggregation property, we need to make use of intrinsic element as something like list item, or you may be using items element. Items is aggregation property, but you need to use item as intrinsic element. So that means for every aggregation property, there will be some intrinsic element associated with that. Items is aggregation property. I'll be showing it in documentation. For that, we have to use item as intrinsic element. And then there will be a property like key comma text property as an intrinsic element property. So please remember that. So whenever you deal with complex elements, 4 options. What is the main element? What is the aggregation property? And what is the intrinsic element? And then the intrinsic element property. So these are the 4 options that you need to consider. So similarly, there is a combo box. That's a main element, or you can call it as complex element. Aggregation property, this is again items you have to use as aggregation property. Item is an intrinsic element. And then you can use key comma text property as intrinsic element property. Then there is multi-combo box. So here also items is aggregation property, item is intrinsic element. You can use key comma text property. You can use key comma text for satisfying intrinsic element property. Similarly, there is multi-input. For multi-input, you need to use suggestion items. Suggestion items is the aggregation property of multi-input element. But intrinsic element will be item. Suggestion items aggregation property also supports item as intrinsic element. For item, as usual, you can use key comma text property. Similarly, there is radio button group. A radio button group, you can use buttons as aggregation property. And you can use radio button as internal element. And the property will be the text property for internal element. So that's how you can use it. Radio button group is a complex element, or you can call it as a main element. Buttons is aggregation property. Radio button acts as internal element. Text is a property of internal element. Similarly, there is tokenizer. Tokenizer contains tokens as aggregation property. And you can use token as internal element by using text property for internal element. Then there is another element like breadcrumbs. You can call it as a complex element or a main element. So breadcrumbs contains links as aggregation property. And you can use link as intrinsic element with the help of text and href property for intrinsic element. Similarly, there is list element. For list element, items is aggregation property according to documentation. For items, you can use standard list item as intrinsic element. You can use standard list item as intrinsic element, or You can use object list item as internal skin element. There is slight difference, but you can use anything. Internal skin element can be standard list item or object list item here. And for internal skin element, you need to use properties like title, description, counter, and info. Info means information. So these are the properties of internal skin element, that is standard list item: title, description, counter, and info. And then there is a table skin element here. Table skin element. Table skin element contains items as aggregation property. And for table, you can use internal skin element. It can be any internal skin element here. Can be any internal skin element. And the property depends on internal skin element here. The property depends on the skin element which you use. That means internal skin element which you use. Any internal skin element, and the property depends on that internal skin element which you use. So table is a complex skin element, or you can call it as a main skin element. It contains items as aggregation property. For that, you can use any internal skin element, and the property depends on the internal skin element which you use. For example, internal skin element can be a text skin element. For that, you need to use text property. If you are using input skin element, then you have to use value property. If you use image, then you need to use SRC property. If you use, for example, slider, then you need to use value property. So depending upon the internal skin element, the property of that is decided. So here, table supports items aggregation property, and you can use any internal skin element. For example, for text, we have to use text property. For input, you have to use value property. For image, you can use SRC property. For slider, we can use value property. So here you can use any internal skin element, and the property depends on that internal skin element. So when we discuss table, we'll get more clarity, but just remember this flow. And not only table, we can use microchart. In Fiori applications, we are going to use microchart. It contains data as aggregation property. And internal skin element will be microchart data. Internal skin element is microchart data. For microchart data, you can have two options: text property for representing x-axis. Charts means, microcharts means it contains two things, x-axis and y-axis. So text property will decide x-axis here. And then there is value property, that is for y-axis here. A microchart is a complex skin element or a main skin element which contains data as aggregation property. For that, you can use microchart data as internal skin element with two properties like text and value. Text represents x-axis for microcharts, value represents y-axis for microcharts. Similarly, not only microcharts, there are regular charts. Microcharts are different, charts are different. Microcharts is for simple graphical format. Charts can have complex graphical format. So when you're using charts, Here also you need to use data as internal skin element. Sorry, data as aggregation property. Microcharts will represent simple graphical format. Charts represent the actual chart format. So for charts, you can use data as aggregation property, and you can use dimension definition. Dimension definition as internal skin element for x-axis. And you need to use measure definition here as internal skin element for representing y-axis. So dimension definition is internal skin element for x-axis, measure definition as an internal skin element for representing y-axis. For dimension definition, we use value property for representing x-axis data. And for measure definition also, we use value property for representing y-axis data. So when you're using charts, you need to use two internal skin elements here, dimension definition as well as measure definition. Dimension definition for x-axis with value property. Measure definition for y-axis with value property. So two options can be used as internal skin element here for charts, because charts contains two options, x-axis and y-axis. So whenever you deal with complex skin elements, this approach you should remember. This is very, very important going forward. And please remember, these things are common for all types of OData services. It can be OData backend ABAP service, OData CDS service, it can be OData external service. It doesn't matter, but this skin element's behavior remains same for Fiori development. Okay, this is very important. Let me write it here. Syntax or the behavior or the coding approach or front-end apps or front-end Fiori app. Front-end Fiori app skin elements are same for all types of OData services. Doesn't matter which service you are using, but the front-end skin element syntax, the behavior, coding, approach remains same for all types of OData services. That means these are same. These things will not change. The way you write the code will not change. Irrespective of the OData service, these are applicable. Same code, same syntax, same behavior, same approach. The backend OData service may be different, but the front end remains same. The front end skin elements behavior syntax remains same. It can be OData ABAP service, or it can be OData CDS service with S/4HANA backend, or it can be OData ABAP service with S/4HANA or ECC, whatever. Or it can be OData external service with non-SAP third-party systems. So whatever it may be, the front-end skin elements behavior, coding, syntax remains same. You can use OData ABAP service for these skin elements, OData CDS service or OData external service. But the behavior, coding, syntax of all these things, whatever I've written here, it remains same. And not only that, especially these skin elements, drop-down box, combo box, multi-combo box, multi-input, radio button group, tokenizer, breadcrumbs, list table, charts, microchart. So these things can also be used in two ways. The OData service can be anything, but technically These screen elements can be used in two ways. So let me write that note as well. All the above screen elements can be used in two ways. One is like with static values. That means these are hard-coded values in the program. The second technique is with backend values. That means the values are coming from backend system via OData service dynamically. That like with backend values, that technically the dynamic values coming from backend via OData service. These screen elements supports two techniques. Sometimes we may use with static values by hard coding the values within the program. The second technique is by populating backend values, which are nothing but dynamic values, which are fetched via OData service. So we are going to understand both the techniques. Sometimes, especially for these things, breadcrumbs, tokenizer, radio button group, multi-combo box, multi-input, select screen element. So for these things, sometimes we use static values, sometimes we may use backend values. But in case of list, table, charts, microcharts, especially for these things, we always go with backend values with the OData service. List, table, charts, microcharts. These things are basically used in real time for backend values to populate data coming from OData service. Okay, whatever it may be, all these screen elements ultimately supports both the techniques, static values approach and backend values approach. So we are going to discuss both one by one. So first, let me go with this one. Select a screen element, which is technically a drop-down box. I want to discuss today with static values here. The next session will deal with backend values. Today we'll go with static values approach here. So what you can do is just open object view.xml file. And you can go inside simple form container, which we have created yesterday. And inside that, you can implement below code. In case of drop-down box, that is by using select screen element, we have to implement this code. Okay, let me start this. And I'll also explain the documentation in that process. Okay, let me start orient file, then web ID. Okay, so yesterday we have used something like object view. We have registered some libraries on top section. And then we started writing the code inside content area by creating simple form with all these labels and simple screen elements. Up to text area, we have done it. Now what I want to do is, I want to take one more label. Along with that, I want to use a drop-down box. So let me add label here, which you are already aware of. You can use label text. For example, I want to use this for selecting country. Direction is a property. and you can use design dark color label I want to use, so you can use design as bold. So this is just a label. Now here, what you need to do, you need to use, I want to create a select screen element here, which is a complex screen element. Or you can call it as a main screen element. So for that, you need to use begin tag and end tag. You need to use begin tag as well as end tag. So let me use that. Select begin tag, end tag, because it's a complex screen element, or you can call it as a main screen element. For this, there is aggregation property. Items is an aggregation property here. So for items aggregation property, here you need to use, again, within that block, you have to use items aggregation property like this when you're dealing with static values. When you're dealing with static values, aggregation property also should be used with begin tag, end tag within this main screen element. So select is a complex screen element, items is aggregation property. Use begin tag, end tag for that. And then you can see item is an internal screen element here. Item is an internal screen element. So, but item belongs to this library. Item is an internal screen element. It belongs to SAP UI core library. It's not part of SAP.m. It's part of core library. SAP UI core library is registered with core as a namespace here, or you can call it as a prefix here. So that's the reason why I can use here core as a namespace. Here you can see these are the list of namespaces. We have registered core as one of the namespace for SAP UI core library. From that library, you can see there are some list of classes here. HTML is one of the class. Icon is one of the class. Item is another class. You can see some screen elements from SAP UI core library. So let me use item class here. Item class, that is technically an internal screen element according to our diagram. Now for item internal screen element, there are two important properties, key, comma, text. These are the two properties of internal screen element. The properties which we use are basically related to internal screen element. Key, comma, text, these are the properties of item internal screen element. So you can use it here. You can see there are some properties. Key is one of the property. And you can see there is text property. So here, in today's session, we are just dealing with static values. Please remember, not backend values. Backend values, that's a separate topic. We'll discuss tomorrow. We are dealing with static values here. So that means static values are nothing but hard-coded values here. So that's the reason why you can hard-code the values here. For example, IN is a key. The text as, for example, India. Now, if you're hard coding the values or you're trying to use static values, so you can repeat this item for n number of values or n number of text values. When you're dealing with static values technique, you can repeat this item here, core item, and you can use again key, comma, text properties. Example, CH, text is something like China. So you can populate n number of static values by just repeating this core item with key, comma, text properties. So let me use it here. I can repeat like this. So let me provide some different key and different text. For example, US. Let me add some values here. Use one more. So these are the list of static values we are trying to populate with the help of item as intrinsic element by using key and text properties. But collection of items are possible because items is an aggregation property of your select screen element here. That's a drop-down box screen element. Now first let me run this. So here you can see, if I go to second screen, in second screen, you can see there is a drop-down box, and drop-down box contains this list of static values here with different countries here. India, China, US, UK, Italy, Iran, Canada. These are the values that are hard-coded within the program, so they are displayed here. Now let me restrict the width for this drop-down box. So I can use width. This is a normal property. You can use it on the main screen element. For example, 250 pixel. So I'm using width 250 pixel. Let me run this. You can use it on main screen element. Now you can see there is a drop-down box newly added, and it contains some list of static values here. So user can select any value. The selected value we can capture by writing code in event handler. And that value can also be sent to backend system via our data service. All those things will come at right stage, don't worry. But this is how you can populate the static values here within the drop-down box by using select screen element. But technically, when you're writing the code, you have to deal with the complex screen element, that's a main screen element. You have to know what is the aggregation property and what is the intrinsic screen element supported by aggregation property and what are the regular properties of intrinsic screen element. You have to follow this approach strictly. Whatever may be the requirement, whatever may be the old data service, but when you're dealing with static values, so this is the technique you have to follow. Okay, so here, let me take up this to make you understand syntax. We'll just take this. So here, if you closely observe this, the select is a complex screen elements according to our approach. Or you can call it as a main screen element or complex screen element. And this items is an aggregation property here. Technically, items is an aggregation property. Please remember that. You're using begin tag, end tag. So it is basically an aggregation property. For aggregation property, you need to use an intrinsic screen element. So this item is an intrinsic screen element here. And you can repeat that intrinsic screen element n number of times here. So here you can use, just put it like this, just simply like this. So this is an intrinsic screen element here. Item is an internal screen element. Okay, then you can see there is properties like key, comma, text properties. Key is a property of that intrinsic screen element. text is a property of that internal skin element. I mention here. So these are the properties. Property of internal skin element. You can have multiple properties for internal skin element. So this is the approach you need to follow when you're dealing with complex skin elements, especially with static approach. This is a syntax. Okay, so let me save this. But before that, let me just repeat. First, complex skin element, then aggregation property. For aggregation property, you need to use internal skin element, and internal skin element contains the regular properties. For example, key comma text in this case. And there is one thing that you need to remember. Item is a class belonging to SAP UI core library. So we are using core as a prefix here, or a namespace. And select is a skin element from sap.m library. Sap.m is a base library. For that, you need not use any prefix here. Select is a skin element coming from sap.m library. There is no namespace for that library because it's a base library. So you need not use any prefix here for using that class. But in case of item class, this belongs to SAP UI core library. It is registered as core as a namespace. So you have to use that core as a prefix here. Okay, so that's a basic difference. Why we are not using prefix for this? Why we are using prefix for this? That you need to understand. Select is a skin element coming from sap.m library, which is a base library. There is no namespace registered for that. So directly you can use it. But in case of item class, this belongs to SAP UI core library, which is registered with core as a prefix on top section of our view. So you have to use the prefix here as a core. Okay, so I hope you got some idea now. This is like select screen element, which is drop down. Now, let me go to the documentation before we proceed further. Let me go to the documentation to understand this. SAP ui5 hana.ondemand.com. SAP ui5 is the actual framework for all Fiori apps. Now, within this, you can see there is sample section. So we can go for select screen element here. That is related to drop down. Let me just search for this. Okay, you can see there is select screen element. Let me check. Okay, you can see there is a select screen element here. This is basically for drop down box. And it contains API reference. I'm just telling you how to understand these aggregation properties and how to utilize it. So for select screen element, there is something like this one. API reference. So just select that API reference here. In API reference, for select screen element, you can see there are normal properties and aggregation properties. Normal properties are straightforward, but here you can see there are aggregation properties also. So one of the aggregation properties items here, you can see this. And it is having cardinality as 0 to n. That means you can have n number of items. You can have 0 item, 1 item, or n number of items. So cardinality is 0 to n. And there is an internal screen element here as item. You can notice that. Item is an internal screen element. You can see this. And it's coming from SAP UI core library. And what is its property of item class or item entrance element, you can click this. You can click on this API reference here. If you select item, then you'll find the regular properties of item class. You can see key is one of the property, text is another property. Key is one property, text is another property. You can notice that. So here, so when you go to select screen element, it contains aggregation property items with cardinality 0 to n, and the internal screen element is item class. Item class contains two main properties like key comma text. When you click on this, you will get that. So as of now, just remember these things. So here, take the screenshot. Understand this. Just focus like this. So select is a main screen element in this case. sap.m is a library for that. And it contains aggregation properties here. It contains aggregation properties. The aggregation properties item here. Items is aggregation property. And it contains 0 to n as a cardinality. And it also contains internal screen element as item class. You can see this. So technically, items is aggregation property according to documentation. And you can see there is cardinality 0 to n, that is a cardinality here. That means you can have n number of items. And you can also get list of items values from backend system. Because the cardinality is 0 to n, you can get collection of records here. Or collection of values from backend because cardinality is 0 to n. In today's session, we are dealing with static value. So we are repeating that item class n number of times. And here you can see item is an internal screen element. This is technically an internal screen element. And for this item internal screen element, as I told you, when you click on this link, you will get its properties. So the two important properties for item class, that is text and key properties. Key comma text, these are important properties. Let me put it like this. If you click on that, you'll get key as well as properties. And these properties comes under internal screen element properties. These are regular properties of internal screen element here. You can call it as properties of internal screen element. So that's how you need to understand this particular documentation here. So main screen element class with its library contains aggregation properties. Items is aggregation property, cardinality. This is an internal screen element. If you click on that, you'll get the regular properties, key comma text. So just remember this. According to this, we have to write the code. Let us not worry about other options. Just focus on what I'm saying. So here, this is like select class. A drop-down box. Now we have already implemented. This code is working fine. Let me just copy these lines. And here, this is what I've already highlighted. Select main screen element. Items is aggregation property. Item is internal screen element. Key comma text, these are internal screen element properties. So we are just following this documentation as it is. Just now I shown you. Now let me go with another screen element here. For example, combo box. Same type of syntax you have to follow. So here, let me use combo box, but today we'll deal with static values. So again, the same story, everything we are writing inside simple form container as of today. So you can implement below code. But what's the basic difference here is, in case of drop-down box allows user to select single value from the existing list. So select screen element, that is a drop-down box, allows end user to select value from existing list only. You can't enter a new value in drop-down on the screen. But in case of combo box, this allows end user to select value from existing list or user can enter, or it allows end user to enter a new value at runtime. Combo box can allow you to select value from existing list, or if required, you can enter a new value at runtime. So technically, combo box is a combination of drop-down box behavior, plus you can use it as an input screen or input screen element behavior. You can select a value from list, or you can input the new value. You can select value from existing list, or you can input a new value. So you can use combo box as a combination of these two behaviors. Now, how to implement the code? Let us understand that. Okay, let me go back to this. Combo box, items is aggregation property, item is internal screen element, key comma text, they are regular properties of internal screen element. So let me write the code here. First, let me take the label. Take the label, same like previously. After adding label, now you can use combo box. It's also a class from sap.m library. You can use combo box, use begin tag, end tag, because it's a complex screen element. Use begin tag and end tag here. Because for complex screen element or main screen element, this is compulsory. And within that, you can use items as aggregation property. So here you can use items as aggregation property. Aggregation property starts with starting letter as lowercase. That syntax rules we'll be discussing later. And here you can see internal screen element can be item for combo box. And item belongs to core library. So let us use core item class. And here also you can use key comma text properties. For example, let me use key and text. So here, let me use course values here. Example, UI is SAP ui5, something like this. And here today we are dealing with all static values. So for static values, you can repeat this item n number of times. Please try to mute at your end. So here, when you're dealing with static values, you can repeat this item n number of times because the cardinality of aggregation property is 0 to n. Because of cardinality 0 to n, you can repeat this item n number of times. Let me add this item. We are just hard coding the values. Let me just change this key and text. Let me just add one more value. Okay, so here in this case, we are trying to repeat this item intrinsic element n number of times because the cardinality of aggregation property is 0 to n. And for intrinsic element, key, comma, text, these are the properties of intrinsic element. So you can use it. Okay, let me run here, save it. You can go to second screen. In second screen, here you can see, okay, there is a combo box, but with a list of course values here. But let me just restrict the width here. Width you can restrict on combo box. Example 250 pixel. So here you can see there is drop down box with countries and there is combo box with course values here. ui5, theory, OData, etc. So user can select any value from this list. User can select value from this list, or if you want, you can enter a new value, for example, .NET. So we can enter that new value. Example, PHP, that's a new value, which is not part of the list, but still we can enter. That's a purpose of combo box here. You can select value from existing list, or you can enter a new value. That's a behavior of combo box here. Very simple. It's working fine. So let me copy these lines. Combo box, you can implement this code. Now let me go with multi-combo box here. Multi-combo box, again with static values. So this multi-combo box allows multiple selections. Our end user allows multiple selections. You can implement below code. So let us write that code according to that approach. So for multi-combo box, again, it's the same story. Multi-combo box has a complex skin element, items as aggregation property, item is intrinsic skin element, key, comma, text, they are regular properties of intrinsic skin element. So let me try that here. First, let me take label, same like earlier. Now here, I want to use multi-combo box. Multi-combo box is also a class from sap.m library. You can see this. So let me use multi-combo box. Use begin tag, end tag because it's a complex skin element. Use begin tag, end tag separately. That's compulsory. And for this multi-combo box, items is aggregation property. So let us use that block. So we can use that block here. Aggregation property block, you can use it. And it supports item as intrinsic element. So here you can use for item class. Item is a class coming from SAP UI core library, which is registered with core as a prefix or a namespace, so you can get that class. And here you can use key and text properties if required. Okay, let me add some list of values. So here, let me use multi-combo box, same as this one. Let me use the same values. I'm repeating this item here. So for multi-combo box items aggregation property, for multi-combo box items aggregation property contains ordinality as 0 to n. So you can repeat this item n number of times. Ordinality is 0 to n, so you can repeat that. Number of items within that block. And on multi-combo box, if you want, you can use regular property, that is width, example 250 pixel. Okay, let me save and run this. So there is multi-combo box here, and each value is having a checkbox. So user can select multiple values in this case. You can see that. So user can select multiple values. So that's the purpose of multi-combo box here. You can pick collection of values in this case. And we can capture, we are going to do that. We are going to capture all multiple selected values inside the controller by writing code in event handlers. Okay, at this point of time, so these are the multiple selections that are allowed in multi-combo box. Okay, this is a code. Let me use it. Okay, let me just once again explain the syntax. So that you can easily remember, and future topics also becomes very easy if you understand this. So as I said here, this is an aggregation. This is a complex skin element here. Multi-combo box is a complex skin element. For complex skin element, there will be items as aggregation property here. Items is aggregation property. So let me write it. Aggregation property. And this aggregation property supports item as intrinsic element. So this is technically intrinsic element. Key is the property of that intrinsic element, and text is the property of intrinsic element. So item is internal skin element, and key comma text, these are the regular properties of that internal skin element. So this is the approach you have to follow when you're dealing with any complex skin element, especially with static values. When you're using static values, For complex screen elements, so this is approach. It can be multi-combo box, select screen element, combo box, multi-input, tokenizer, whatever. This approach remains same. Okay, let me save this. So this is like multi-combo box coding syntax. Now let me go to the documentation, whether this is true or not. Whether this is really true or not, let us justify that through the documentation. So let me go to this SAP ui5 hana.ondemand.com. And you can go to sample section and you can search for multi-combo box. Let me just select that. Okay, you can see multi-combo box. For multi-combo box, you can see there is API reference. Okay, let me drink some water. Okay, you can see here there is multi-combo box. That's a class name with sap.m as a library. And you can see there is API reference for multi-combo box. So you have to select that. Select that API reference. Then you'll get normal properties, aggregation properties, events, methods, etc. But here, if I go to aggregations, in aggregations, you can see there is items as one of the aggregation property here. Items is aggregation property. Cardinality is 0 to n. The internal screen element is item from SAP UI core library. And if you click on this item, you will find the normal properties of that item class. Like for example, key property, text property. So you can see that. Okay, let me go back. Let me represent this in our diagram. Okay, so here, so if you closely observe this, multi-combo box is technically the class. sap.m is a library for that particular class. Multi-combo box contains aggregations. Items is aggregation property, cardinality 0 to n, and item is an internal screen element which contains two properties, key comma text. So while referring the documentation, this is how you need to proceed. Say suppose after completing the training, SAP may release some more new screen elements, but you need not panic because ultimately it has to follow this approach. The name of the aggregation property may be different. The name of the internal screen element may be different. The name of the complex screen element may be different. But whenever they give some new complex screen elements, as a developer point of view, this is the approach you need to follow and you can proceed further. So this is like aggregation property, cardinality, and internal screen element. Internal screen element has two options, key as well as text in this case also. So here, first aggregation property, then cardinality, because you can repeat those items or item, and this is internal screen element. And these are the internal screen element properties. So by using this approach, you can explore any screen element. Even if SAP releases some new screen elements in the future, you need not panic. Ultimately, just follow this technique. in case of complex skin elements. So the foundation should be strong so that you can explore any new skin element in the future. So this is like this is like multi-combo box class. Now let us go with another skin element, that is multi-input. Multi-input contains suggestion items as aggregation property here. Items are not supported. Here you have to use suggestion items as aggregation property. But item is internal skin element, key comma text is a regular property. Okay, let me proceed with that. Let me use multi-input skin element with static values in today's session. This is an alternative for multi-combo box. Multi-input also allows multiple selections. Multi-input is an alternative for multi-combo box. You can implement below code. Let us go with multi-input. First, let me take the label, same like earlier. It's just a label. After label, now I want to use multi-input. That's also a class from sap.m library. It's new class available, part of sap.m. Multi-input. So this is a complex skin element, so definitely you have to use begin tag, end tag. And this multi-input contains suggestion items as aggregation property. So let us use that here. Suggestion items, that's suitable one. Is another one, suggestion columns, that also can be used. Let us use this suggestion items. Use begin tag, end tag even for aggregation property. Aggregation property, first word, first letter, it's lowercase. Suggestion, S is lowercase, you can see that. Those rules I'll discuss later, let us not make it complex. So here, suggestion items is an aggregation property, use begin tag, end tag block. And within that, you can use item as internal skin element. The same story. For that, you can use key comma text as regular properties for internal skin element. Okay, let me add the same values here. For multi-input also, let me add the same items here. So you can save it. Let me run this. Just we are repeating the list of items with key and text here. Okay, but it's better to use with countries. This is a little bit confusing, so better to use with countries. Let me use these things. Use anything, but let me use with country here. Select country. And to have an impact, let me add some more values. Okay, this is enough. think width is missing. Let me add width also before we test the final output. So here you can see there is multi-combo box. Multi-combo box, it contains each value with a checkbox here. But in case of multi-input, you need to type the starting letter. For example, if I type I, then there are 3 values starting with I. So those values will be popped up. Multi-input, that means user has to provide some input here. For example, starting letter I, then you are getting list of countries starting with I. If I type something like U, then there are 2 countries starting with U, US and UK. If I type something like C, then you're getting 2 values, China and Canada. So multi-input means user has to provide some starting input so that you can get the pop-up values here. So ultimately it also allows multiple selection. So 3 values are selected here. So if I type something like C, then those values are popped up. If I type I, those values are displayed here. Type U, you can see that. So ultimately, it also allows multiple selections, which is simply an alternative for multi-combo box. Okay, so that is working fine. So let me copy these lines. Right, so this is for multi-combo box. Same approach we are going to follow for something like, so this is for multi-input. It's working fine. So let me go with next skin element, that is radio button group. But with static values in today's session. So you know, collection of radio buttons, it's part of radio button group. So let us directly implement below code. Let us implement this code. So here, it is the same approach you have to follow. Okay, first let me select label. This is a label. For example, select course. And here, I want to use radio button group. It's a complex skin element. Radio button group is a complex skin element, so use that here. Radio button group is a class. It's a class from sap.m library. So use begin tag, end tag. Use begin tag, end tag, and it contains, you can see buttons as aggregation property here for radio button group. That's the name of the aggregation property, buttons. So let us use aggregation block, buttons, begin tag, end tag. Aggregation block, begin tag, end tag. If you are using static values, you have to use begin tag, end tag even for aggregation property. And for this buttons, the internal skin element is radio button here. Internal skin element is a radio button. So let us use that here. Within this block, you can use radio button. Radio button group also belongs to sap.m library. And radio button group contains mainly radio button as internal skin element, and that contains text property here. That's a regular property of radio button. So let me use text property. For example, SAP ui5. Something like this. So we are providing collection of radio buttons because button supports cardinality 0 to n. So let me save this. And run it here. Now you can see the list of radio buttons are available here. Default first value selected, but user can select any value, and that selected value can be captured by writing code in event handler. So we are able to get radio button group. Now, by default, everything is vertical. It's displayed in single column, vertically, all the radio buttons. But I want to display it horizontally. If you want to display horizontally, then you can try this. Here you can see columns. Columns, for example, I can use 6 columns. So everything will be horizontal now. By default, columns is 1. So everything is vertical. If I use columns as 6, then you can get horizontal format. Default is columns 1. So that's the reason why you're getting everything vertically. But I want to use 6 items in 6 columns, so everything looks horizontal now. So let me run it. Now you can see radio buttons, they are displayed in 6 columns, so everything is looking like they're in horizontal manner. So you can have a radio button group vertically as well as horizontally like this. If you want, you can use columns as, for example, 3, columns as 3, then you can see the difference. Columns as 3, you can see each column contains 2 values here. But ultimately it's one group inside this. So that is possible. You can use whichever you want. By default is columns 1. Then everything is displayed vertically here. Okay, so here you can see it is back to vertical manner because columns is 1 and the default is also 1. Even if you don't use columns is 1 default. Right, so let me just copy these lines. A radio button group. Okay, let me go to the documentation once before we proceed. So here you can see SAP ui5 hana.ondemand.com. Go to samples and search for radio button group. Somewhere here you can see radio button group. It contains API reference. You can see API reference. Select that API reference. And radio button group is a class from sap.m library. And it contains aggregations here. And you can see there is one aggregation property that is buttons. You can notice that. Buttons, that's a default aggregation property with cardinality 0 to n. And you can see the internal skin element supported is radio button here. Type indicates internal skin element here. And this radio button, if you click on this link, it opens its properties. You can open its properties, and text is one of the property of radio button. Apart from other properties, text is one of the main property for radio button text. So it's the same story. I've written the same here. Radio button group. It's a complex skin element. Buttons is aggregation property. Radio button is internal skin element. Text is a property of internal skin element. So The same pattern has to be followed for all the screen elements which I've written here. Okay, let me take this screenshot once. So here, so radio button group is our actual class in this case, which is part of sap.m as a base library. And it contains aggregations here. Buttons is aggregations, cardinality is 0 to n. You can see internal screen element is radio button. So if you click on this radio button, then you'll get its API reference with its properties. So the point here is radio button group has buttons as aggregation property, cardinality 0 to n. Radio button is internal screen element. And it has one main property, that is text property. Of course, there are other properties, but text is an important property here. Okay, let me just mention that for clarity point of view. Aggregation property is just cardinality to define the capacity. This is internal screen element, and text is a property. Okay, so I hope you got some idea now for radio button group. Okay, let me go with another screen element, that is tokenizer. Same approach. So tokenizer contains tokens. Token as internal screen element, text is a property. Tokenizer is just to display collection of values in the form of tokens. Okay, let me use label here like this. And here, let me use this label for country. Display just collection of values. So I want to use tokenizer. That's a screen element. That's a complex screen element from sap.m library. It's a complex screen element. Use begin tag, end tag. And it contains tokens as aggregation property. So use that here. Tokens as aggregation property. So aggregation property can have a separate block like this. You have tokens, that's a separate block. And it supports token as internal screen element with the text property. So here cardinality is 0 to n, so you can use n number of tokens. So token is also a class, separate class from sap.m library. So token, and it contains text property here. So let me use some list of values. So like that, you can have n number of tokens, different values. Add some more values. And some more tokens we are trying to add. Save it, and you can run this. So here you can see the values are displayed in the form of tokens here. It's mainly just for display purpose. You can use tokenizer with collection of tokens like this. You can see the output. It's not for selecting the value. Basically, it's just for display purpose mainly. Right. So this is a code that is working fine. Let me use it here. Tokenizer. Here we are dealing today with static values. So implement below code.
Muted.
Now let me go with one last screen element for today's session. That is breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs also with static values. So here technically breadcrumbs means you can have collection of links. Breadcrumbs is to display collection of links. You can implement below code. The last screen element for today's session. So here, let me add label. For example, select person. And here, I want to use breadcrumbs. That's a screen element class. That's a complex screen element technically. Breadcrumbs from sap.m library. Breadcrumbs use begin tag, end tag because it's a complex screen element according to this. Breadcrumbs is a complex screen element. Use begin tag, end tag. And it contains links as aggregation property. Contains links as aggregation property. So let us use that here. Links, aggregation property block. You can use it like this with begin tag, end tag. And links is also internally cardinality with 0 to n. So you can have n number of links. And the internal screen element is link here. And that link can be repeated n number of times because the links is cardinality with 0 to n. So I can use link as internal screen element. Link. Here you can use some text, href property. You can use text target as, for example, underscore blank. I want to open each link in a separate tab. So use underscore blank and href. You can provide URL address. So let me use n number of links. Link 1, link 2, something like this. Let me use some collection of links here. Okay, so here, let me use some link, some celebrity names or something like that. So here, something like this. So some list of random values I'm using here. So use this. I need to cover north, south, east, west. Okay. So we are trying to use some list of values here. These are just text. These are text labels that will be displayed on the screen. So not only that, here you can see there is target. Target is just for displaying the link on a separate tab or a separate window. Then here you can use URL address. For example, I want to search for so-and-so person with a particular URL address. So here you can have HTTP, something like www.google.com/ you can use search $Q. Q is query string. Q is query string here. So the query string can be anything, like the name of the person you can provide, or you can make it dynamic here. For example, this is the value, you can search for that. And here also you can use URL address, something like HTTP www. something like google.com/. You can use search. Search is a keyword, Q is a query string. Query string equal to name of the person you can supply here. And this name of the person can be dynamic as well. That you'll understand when we write the script code. Similarly, you can use the same syntax.
Muted.
Here. Q equal to query string. Right, so now let me run this. Let us see how exactly things will happen when we run the output. We have used target as _blank because it has to open every link in a separate tab. So there are some list of values here. So if I select something like this one, first value, it opens in a separate tab with that particular links, the links associated with that particular link which we have selected. So it is opening here. Similarly, if I select second person, it opens in a separate tab. And here you're able to get that with a query string. It is pre-populating that query string, and you're able to get the list of values with the query string which we have provided. So you'll get the search results directly based on that selected query string. And so suppose if I select code value, so you'll get that. You can see. If I select fourth value, for example, Sachin Pilot, so you'll get that. So it is taking that query string directly here, and it is showing the results page. Query string Q is query string. So it will populate that query string here, and then it will search for that. So that's how you can supply, and you can use URL address dynamically. If I select this, you can get that. So you're able to get everything here. So you can use breadcrumbs in this manner, or you can also get these values from the backend. The text values can come from backend, and based on that, we can supply the query string dynamically. That's also possible. As of now, let us stick to this. Breadcrumbs with hyperlinks. Okay, so everything is provided. So what we are trying to do is, for href property, we are using google.com. After that, the keyword is search here, the standard keyword. Then you can use Q. Q is a query string here. Q is a query string, and that query string can be the name of the person which you are supplying to the link text here. And that also can be dynamic, that we can do it when we go for scripting. So that's a basic thing you can use. So here, this is common. After that, you can use search. That's a keyword, Q. Q is a query string equal to some value that you can supply. Or it can be value text, whatever. which you want to search for. You can use it for href property. Now what I'll do is I'll stop here. In the next session also, we are going to discuss the same screen elements, but with a different approach. That is, in the next session, we'll deal with backend values, how the data can come from backend via OData service. And we'll use the same screen elements up to here tomorrow also, but with backend values, slightly with a different syntax, but the properties remain same. After that, I'll clarify your doubts. No need to worry. Today, I'm not going to clarify any doubt because it's not completed. Tomorrow, we'll try to go with second technique, then we'll try to understand the difference between first technique and second technique. Okay.